You wake up already fighting your own mind. Same doubt suits. Marcus Aurelius ended that war. Today you start yours.
You sit there in the dim light of your room, the silence around you, doing nothing to quiet the storm inside. The book of Marcus Aurelius lies open on the table, pages turned to passages you have read before, yet your mind refuses to settle on them. Instead, it pulls you toward every unfinished task, every slight from the day, every doubt about whether your efforts amount to anything real. This is the starting point of your struggle, the unmastered mind that promises discipline but delivers distraction, that vows self-control but yields to impulse when no one is watching. You tell yourself you are serious, committed, yet the evidence is in the hours lost to mental noise, the decisions made in haste, the character that remains unformed because you have not yet claimed ownership of your thoughts. The hard truth begins here. Your mind is not a neutral tool, it is a battleground, and you have been losing ground without realizing it. Like the emperor who ruled an empire while commanding his own inner empire, you must start by recognizing that self-mastery is not a gift or a sudden insight. It is the result of deliberate, often painful, confrontation with your own weaknesses. You feel the pull of delayed gratification slipping away in small moments, checking messages instead of focusing on the work at hand, allowing resentment to simmer rather than addressing it directly. This is not failure of willpower alone. It is failure of awareness. The first technique emerges from the recognition, the practice of morning confrontation with your mental state. Before the day claims you, you sit and map the landscape of your mind. What thoughts are already stirring? What impulses are waiting to take control? You do not wish them away, you name them, see their patterns, and decide in advance how you will respond when they arise. This is not optimism, it is preparation, the kind that Marcus practiced amid the pressures of command, where every decision carried weight for his character as much as for his rule. You may resist this at first, telling yourself there is no time, that the day is already too full. That resistance is the mind protecting its freedom to roam unchecked. Yet when you persist, you begin to see how much of your inner life is habitual reaction rather than chosen action. The second technique follows closely, the deliberate separation of your identity from the content of your thoughts. You are not the anger that flares when plans go awry. You are not the doubt that creeps in during quiet moments. These are visitors, and you are the one who decides whether to host them or send them on their way. This separation sharpens self-awareness because it forces you to ask what remains when the noise is stripped away: your responsibility to respond with reason, your commitment to building character through restraint. Without it, your sense of self stays fragile, tied to every passing emotion, every external outcome. As you move through the day, the third technique tests you in real time, the restraint of immediate reaction in favor of inner silence. When a colleague's comment lands sharply, the urge to reply, to defend, to assert your position is strong. You feel it in your chest, the heat rising, the words forming. Here you pause not out of fear, but out of discipline. You allow the silence to hold, letting the impulse pass without feeding it. This is where emotional restraint is forged, where you learn that speaking from reaction diminishes your authority over yourself more than any external judgment could. The listener in you knows this truth. How many relationships, how many opportunities have been strained by words spoken too soon? Inner silence is not emptiness, it is space for clarity, the space Marcus cultivated to lead with steady judgment rather than personal ego. The fourth technique builds on this foundation, the cultivation of delayed gratification and the formation of habits. You want the results of discipline, focus, resilience, a steady character, but you shy from the daily cost. You skip the early rise, the consistent review, the small acts of endurance because the immediate comfort calls louder. This is the pressure point where your growth stalls. To master the mind, you must choose the harder path repeatedly, knowing that character is built in these unseen moments. You apply it by committing to one habit today, perhaps reviewing your actions at day's end without excuse, and holding to it even when motivation fades. This delayed reward strengthens self-control because it shifts your identity from someone who reacts to circumstance to someone who shapes it through consistent choice. By evening, the fifth technique reveals itself in reflection, the honest accounting of where your mind has wandered and why. You sit with the day's events, not to judge yourself harshly, but to see clearly. Where did distraction win? Where did restraint hold? This accounting exposes the gaps in your self-awareness, the places where responsibility for your inner state were abdicated. You see that personal growth is not linear. It is a series of returns to the path after every deviation. The Emperor's example presses upon you here, the man who documented his own shortcomings not for show, but for the discipline of facing them. You feel the engagement now, the quiet pressure building as these practices take hold. Your mind is beginning to resist less, but the real work is just starting. The sixth technique enters as the practice of viewing your thoughts as impressions to be tested rather than truths to be believed. When doubt about your capability arises, you stop and examine it. Is this based in evidence or fear? This testing builds resilience because it frees you from being ruled by unverified mental narratives. The seventh technique complements it, the deliberate building of inner silence through solitary walks or moments of stillness, where you practice existing without the need to fill the space with thought or plan. This silence is the ground in which self-mastery takes root, the place where you confront the discomfort of being alone with your unfiltered self. The eighth technique addresses the core of your identity, taking full responsibility for the state of your mind as the foundation of your character. You no longer blame circumstances or others for your lack of focus or restraint. You own it as yours to command. This responsibility is unforgiving because it leaves no room for excuses, yet it is liberating because it places the power where it belongs with you. As these first 8 techniques begin to interlock, you sense the shift not dramatic but steady. Your mind is no longer the enemy. It is the territory you are learning to govern. One deliberate choice at a time. The journey continues, and the pressure to persist grows with each step you take. The next day brings the true test, where the practices meet the reality of your life. You wake with the intention to maintain the morning confrontation, but the mind already offers reasons to skip it: fatigue, the press of tasks, the promise that tomorrow will be better. This is the point where many turn back, but you stay with it, sitting in the quiet and naming the excuses for what they are, the mind's way of preserving old patterns. The 9th technique emerges here, the practice of voluntary discomfort, to strengthen your tolerance for what is necessary but unpleasant. You choose to forego a small comfort, the extra hour of rest, the easy distraction, and endure the discomfort instead. This is not punishment, it is training, the kind that Marcus endured in campaigns and reflections, knowing that comfort weakens the will while endurance builds it. You feel the resistance in your body and mind, the urge to yield, and you hold against it, sharpening your self-control in the process. As you move into your work, the 10th technique addresses the scattered focus that has plagued you, the training of sustained attention on a single task until completion. You select one responsibility and give it your full presence, refusing to let the mind jump to the next thing or the previous regret. This is where discipline is proven. In the moments when boredom or doubt tempts you to abandon the effort, you notice how your identity shifts subtly from someone who starts many things to someone who finishes what matters. The listener, you must acknowledge the hard truth that scattered attention is not busyness, it is avoidance of depth, of the responsibility to see things through. Midday brings a moment of provocation, a disagreement that stirs old anger. The 11th technique is called upon the restraint of emotional response through physical awareness. You notice the tension in your shoulders, the quickening breath, and you use that awareness to create space. You do not suppress the emotion, you observe it, and choose not to act from it. This restraint protects your character, preventing the erosion that comes from unchecked reactions. You see how emotional mastery is not the absence of feeling, but the authority over how it influences your actions. The pressure builds here, the calm insistence that you can no longer afford to let anger or frustration define your responses. In the afternoon, the 12th technique deepens self-awareness, the regular questioning of your motives in every decision. Why are you pursuing this task? Is it for external approval or for the integrity of the action itself? This questioning exposes the places where your discipline is superficial, where delayed gratification is sacrificed for immediate validation. You confront the truth that true personal growth requires aligning your actions with your deepest values, not the passing desires of the moment. By evening, the 13th technique integrates the day's experiences, the construction of a mental ledger of victories and lapses in self-control. You review not to dwell but to adjust, noting wherein a silence was maintained and where it was lost. This ledger becomes a tool for responsibility, a record that holds you accountable without mercy. The Emperor's meditations were such a ledger, a private accounting that guided his conduct. You feel the weight of it, the unforgiving clarity that your mind state is your own doing. The 14th technique addresses the core challenge of identity, redefining yourself through the lens of your mind's mastery, rather than your achievements or roles. You are not the successful person others see. You are the person who commands his thoughts. This redefinition is difficult because it strips away comforting illusions, but it grounds your growth in something enduring. The 15th technique completes the set for now, the ongoing commitment to inner silence, as the ultimate test of mastery. You practice it in small intervals throughout the day, returning to stillness whenever the mind wanders, building the habit that sustains all others. As these techniques begin to work together, the engagement deepens. You sense the mind yielding, not easily, but through persistent effort. The journey is far from over, but the foundation is laid, and the pressure to continue is now internal, a quiet drive toward the self-mastery you seek. The weeks that follow test the integration of these practices in ways you had not anticipated. The mind, having tasted the structure of discipline, fights back with subtler forms of resistance, subtle doubts that undermine your commitment. Moments where the old habits reassert themselves under the guise of practicality. You feel this in the quiet hours, when the day's structure falls away and the temptation to revert is strongest. This is the next layer of your struggle. The realization that mastery is not a one-time achievement but a daily recommitment, and that the mind will exploit any weakness in your resolve. You return to the morning confrontation with renewed focus, but now you extend it to anticipate not only the day's events but the mental traps they may trigger. The first technique evolves, becoming more precise in identifying your personal vulnerabilities, the tendency to overthink decisions, the pull toward perfectionism that delays action. This anticipation sharpens your responsibility, reminding you that ignoring these patterns is the same as inviting them to control you. In your interactions, the restraint of reaction is tested repeatedly. A project delay, a critical feedback, a personal disappointment, each one offers the opportunity to apply the techniques or to fall back. You choose the former, using physical awareness to create the pause, then testing the impression before responding. The hard truth here is that emotional restraint is lonely work. It often goes unnoticed by others, yet it builds the inner strength that no external success can replace. You begin to see how your identity shifts from reactive to responsive, from someone driven by circumstance to someone guided by principle. The practice of delayed gratification extends to larger areas now, deferring immediate pleasures for the sake of long-term character development. You skip the easy distraction, the unnecessary purchase, the social validation that pulls you away from solitary reflection. This delay is uncomfortable, exposing the depth of your attachment to comfort, but it strengthens the muscle of self-control. The listener in you must face that without this, your discipline remains superficial, easily broken when tested. The evening accounting becomes more rigorous, revealing patterns you had missed, the way doubt creeps in after success, the way silence is hardest to maintain in solitude. This accounting challenges you to take ownership without self-pity, to see each lapse as information for adjustment rather than proof of failure. The attention training deepens, allowing you to sustain focus through longer periods of effort. You notice how the mind's wandering was a form of escape from the difficulty of sustained work. By bringing it back repeatedly, you build resilience, the kind that Marcus displayed in his writings amid personal losses and public duties. The questioning of motives becomes a constant companion, sharpening self-awareness to the point where you can no longer hide from misaligned intentions. This leads to adjustments in your daily choices, aligning them more closely with the character you wish to build. The redefinition of identity gains traction as you see the results of these practices: greater clarity in decisions, reduced inner turmoil, a growing sense of sovereignty over your thoughts. The commitment to inner silence becomes the capstone, the practice that ties them all together, creating the space in which all other techniques operate effectively. As the engagement rises, you feel the cumulative effect, the mind becoming more pliable, more yours to direct. The pressure is now a welcome one, the sign that growth is occurring through persistent effort. The months bring a new depth to the journey, where the techniques are no longer separate efforts but interconnected responses to the challenges of living. You encounter situations that demand the full application of what you have built: the unexpected setback in a long-term goal, the interpersonal conflict that tests your restraint, the periods of solitude that challenge your ability to maintain inner silence. In these moments, the mind's old habits re-emerge with greater sophistication, disguised as reasonable concerns or justified reaction. This is the next pressure point, the recognition that self-mastery requires vigilance against your own complacency, the quiet assumption that the work is done. You apply the morning confrontation to these larger tests, anticipating not only the events but the emotional and mental responses they will evoke. This preparation allows you to enter the day with a plan for your inner state, reducing the power of surprise. The separation of identity from thoughts helps you observe these responses without identifying with them, maintaining the distinction between the observer and the observed. When the setback arrives, the restraint of reaction is your first line of defense. You feel the surge of frustration, the urge to blame or withdraw, but you hold the silence, using physical awareness to steady yourself. Then you test the impression. Is this setback a catastrophe or an opportunity for adjustment? The response that follows is measured, focused on what you can control: your effort, your attitude, your next action. Delayed gratification plays its role in sustaining the effort through the setback, reminding you that the character built in adversity is the one that lasts. You choose to persist in the work, even when results are not immediate, strengthening your discipline through the choice itself. The evening accounting captures the full picture, revealing how the techniques supported each other in the moment. You see the places where vigilance lapsed and commit to reinforcement the next day. Attention training allows you to stay with the task despite the distraction of worry, completing what is necessary without fragmentation. The questioning of motives ensures that your persistence is rooted in integrity rather than ego or fear. The redefinition of identity is reinforced by these experiences, as you see yourself not as the person defined by outcomes but as the one who maintains reason amid them. Inner silence becomes the refuge in which you process the day's events, the space where clarity emerges without the interference of unchecked emotion. As the integration deepens, the engagement intensifies. You feel the mind's resistance giving way to cooperation, the struggle transforming into a disciplined practice that defines your days. The pressure is now the fuel for continued growth, the reminder that the work is never complete but always rewarding. The year brings the deepest tests yet, moments where the accumulated practices are pushed to their limits by events that strike at the core of your sense of self. A major project fails despite your best efforts. A relationship strains under the weight of unspoken expectations, and periods of intense solitude force you to confront the full extent of your inner life without distraction. The mind, sensing the vulnerability, offers familiar escapes: blame, withdraw, endless analysis, but the techniques you have built provide the counter, the structure to meet these challenges with the same calm authority Marcus sought in his own reflections. The morning confrontation now includes not only anticipation but the reaffirmation of your responsibility for your response. You name the potential pains and decide in advance to meet them with restraint and reason, reducing their power to unsettle you. When the failure occurs, the separation of identity allows you to view it as an event, not a definition of your worth. You are the person who acts with integrity. The outcome does not change that. Restraint holds as others offer opinions or criticism, allowing you to respond from clarity rather than defense. Delayed gratification sustains you through the aftermath, choosing the hard work of analysis and adjustment over the easy comfort of resignation. The evening accounting becomes a ritual of honest ownership, mapping the day's mental landscape and the effectiveness of your practices. Attention training keeps you engaged in the necessary recovery steps, preventing the scattering that would compound the loss. Questioning motives ensures that your recovery is directed toward genuine growth rather than restoration of ego. The redefinition of identity is tested and strengthened as you emerge from the failure with a clearer sense of self based on your conduct rather than the result. Inner silence provides the space to process the pain without amplification, allowing clarity to emerge from the discomfort. As these practices operate in concert, the engagement reaches a new level. You feel the mind's transformation, the shift from battleground to governed territory, the pressure now a steady companion in your pursuit of mastery. The progression continues into a phase of consolidation, where the techniques are tested and sustained, everyday application rather than acute crisis. The mind, having been reshaped through repeated effort, still presents subtle challenges, moments of creeping complacency, the slow return of old patterns when vigilance wanes, the quiet doubt that the changes are permanent. This is the ongoing struggle of self-mastery, the recognition that discipline is maintained through constant renewal, that character is not a fixed state, but a living practice. You refine the morning confrontation to include a review of the previous day's integration, adjusting your anticipation based on what you have learned about your vulnerabilities. The separation of identity becomes more automatic, allowing you to navigate daily interactions with greater steadiness. Restraint is applied in small, cumulative ways, preserving energy and clarity over time. Delayed gratification extends to the long view of your life, choosing actions that build enduring character over immediate satisfaction. The evening accounting evolves into a tool for pattern recognition, helping you anticipate and prevent lapses. Attention training supports consistency in habits, turning focus into a reliable strength. Questioning motives keeps your actions aligned with your values, preventing drift. The redefinition of identity solidifies as your sense of self becomes rooted in the mastery of your mind rather than external measures. Inner silence becomes the default state in moments of transition, the foundation for all other practices. The engagement is now sustained and deep, the pressure a familiar and motivating force that drives you to greater consistency. As time passes, the journey enters a phase of refinement, where the techniques are honed through repeated application in varied circumstances. The mind offers new layers of challenge, deeper attachments to outcomes, subtler forms of self-deception, the temptation to claim mastery before it is fully earned. This is the unforgiving clarity of the path. True self-mastery demands ongoing honesty, the willingness to see your remaining weaknesses without illusion. The morning confrontation becomes a cornerstone, incorporating insights from previous days to strengthen anticipation and resolve. Separation of identity allows for greater objectivity in self-assessment. Restraint is refined to include proactive choices that prevent unnecessary conflicts. Delayed gratification is applied to personal ambitions, ensuring they serve character rather than ego. The evening accounting focuses on the integration of all practices, identifying synergies and gaps. Attention training is extended to creative and reflective pursuits, enhancing depth. Questioning motives is used to examine long-held assumptions about success and fulfillment. The redefinition of identity is continually adjusted as new experiences reveal new aspects of your character. Inner silence is cultivated in increasingly challenging environments, strengthening its role as the core of mastery. The engagement peaks with a sense of profound personal responsibility, the pressure transforming into the quiet satisfaction of a disciplined life. The full arc of your journey culminates in the lived reality of these practices, as the defining elements of your existence. The mind, once the source of constant turmoil, is now the domain you govern with the same steady hand Marcus brought to his duties. The 15 techniques woven through confrontation, separation, restraint, delayed gratification, accounting, attention, questioning, redefinition, silence, and the interconnections have reshaped not only your responses but your fundamental approach to living. You meet each day with the calm authority that comes from ownership of your inner world, the responsibility that leaves no room for excuses, the discipline that turns potential weakness into strength. Yet this mastery is not an end, it is the beginning of a lifelong practice. The mind will continue to present challenges, and your response will determine the depth of your character. As you reflect on the path you have walked, consider which element of this discipline you will reinforce tomorrow, not as a grand gesture, but as a single, deliberate choice in service of the person you are becoming. The work of inner governance is yours alone, and in its quiet persistence lies the truest form of freedom, built by Stoicism.